It's really good to see you this morning. I have been waiting for this Sunday, and I realized this morning, Julie Huff said, "How are you doing, Pastor Karyn?" And Carol Gilderoy said, "How are you doing, Pastor Karyn?" And I said, "I'm doing really well, but I'm feeling like I'm holding something important today." And that's all I know. It feels like something important today. And the reason for that is because we've decided to dedicate this Sunday in honor of Indigenous Peoples Day. And we want to hold that with humility and respect. And we have put into our worship this morning liturgy that uses the words and voices and musical notes of Indigenous people from several different tribes. And I want you to know that before we put a word in here or a musical note, we went out and asked for permission for everything we used so that we would use it respectfully, so that we would use it as a gift for this day to maybe experience something new about the love of God in this place that we hadn't even thought about or heard about before. So that's why when people say, "How are you doing, Pastor Karyn?" I'm doing really well, but I am holding something precious. And I am asking all of you this morning to hold that with me too, as we worship together in this place. I am Pastor Karyn Frazier, the associate pastor of this church, Fauntleroy Church, United Church of Christ, and we welcome you to this worship in all the ways the words and musical notes invite us in to experience God's love. And we welcome those of you who are worshiping in the virtual pews. You are an extension of the love in this place. I am not holding this preciousness today all by myself. No one ever does in this church. I'm holding it with Braun, who has set up some amazing things to make you curious this morning. And the beautiful talents and gifts of this choir, I'm holding it, or it's being held well and sound by Ben and Jalis and Julie, who's our liturgist, and Carolyn Tucker, who's going to join me for some sacred storytelling at the sermon time. We are holding this together, and we hope that you are holding all of this worship in your hands as well. Let's invite Gordy up, who is holding all of our announcements this morning.
Good morning. I was asked to be brief again, and there's no way in heck I can do it with this church and all the things that are going on. So thank you for joining us worship today, whether you're sitting in the pews or joining us virtually. For those of you worshiping in person, please pick up the pads of paper hanging from the hooks on the pews in front of you, near the center aisle. Fill them out and pass them along to those sitting next to you. Today we'll be collecting a special offering. Neighbors in Need is an annual offering of the United Church of Christ. This year, 1/3 of the donations received will be set aside for the United Church of Council for American Indian Ministries. Remaining funds will be strengthened in other areas of justice work the National United Church of Christ does on our behalf and focus on mental health as a universal right. All are important issues at this time. This Wednesday, if you're not doing anything for dinner, we sure can use a boost of attendance here for a celebration of the Fauntleroy Y and the YMCA's 100th birthday, one event of many, and we are going to have a chili cook-off. And it's going to be here, and basically we're using this as a fundraising with the Y to help wipe out all medical debt in default for residents of King County who are living at least 4 times below the poverty level. This chili cook-off will take place in Fellowship Hall from 6 o'clock till 8:30. Cost is $15. Kids 10 and under are free. You'll get a chance to try up to at least 8 to 10 chilies. Vote for your favorite chili. Volunteers will provide cornbread. Guess what? Beer and wine and root beer floats. Not saying that might be the big draw, but it is. It'll be available as well. If you don't have something going on Wednesday night, hope you'll join me there, and we'll ask that if you are going to attend, please RSVP today using the QR code found in your bulletin, or by clicking the link found in last week's newsletter, or on our Facebook page. Payments are taken at the door. We'd also use your help in setting up and cleaning up from the event, being a runner, and baking cornbread. So sign up the volunteers at the Get Involved table as well in the narthex, or filling out the form found in your newsletter. Next Saturday, October 19th, we hope you join us in providing and serving lunch for the Welcome Table in White Center. This is our monthly commitment to support our neighbors in need. You'll find a QR code to scan in your bulletin and a link in your newsletter for details and to sign up. Also that morning, our youth group will join youth from the Y to decorate cakes for the Fall Festival. I didn't have to do that. Didn't even have to schedule it. Sign up at the Get Involved table to bring cakes for them to decorate. At 6 p.m. on the 19th, we hope to see you at the Westside Interfaith Network Chili Cook-Off. Another one, not the same. 2 chili cook-offs in 1 week. Ooh. Chili, chili, chili. It's a fundraiser for the WIN organizes the Welcome Table. Doug and Carrie will be competing with their chilies, and Anna will be making the dessert for the Dessert Dash. And again, yes, there are 2 chili cook-offs in the same week. And let me have a countdown one more time for a woohoo. 3, 2, 1. Woohoo! Okay. On the 20th, a week from today, the Fall Festival starts. And we basically have been doing this for over 20 years, and I believe it has a tremendous impact in the community. It's amazing when you're working with kids making a birdhouse or pumpkin painting or anything else, just to see the smile and joy on the face of the people in the community. And it's a chance to celebrate. And we've been keeping it free for the 20 some odd years we've been doing it. We do need some donations. When we first started out, our budget was 1/4 of what it is today for the same things. So, and we're going to have to probably do more fundraising next year to make sure we don't come up to it, but we could sure use anything that anybody can give. We also need volunteers for a lot of stations. If you have a child in school who needs community service credit, we give that. Rain or shine, that sense of community, joy of seeing kids' faces light up, it's an amazing experience if you haven't been there. And again, there's still more. Look at your bulletin, weekly newsletter for more details about all these events, and join us for coffee hour after worship today in the narthex. It's the gathering space just outside the sanctuary. Enjoy refreshments and fellowship together. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordy. I know that sounded like a lot, but I want to lift up a couple of things, or just underline some things that Gordy just said. If you come to the celebration of the Y and the church's birthday, 100th birthday, the goal of that is that we are working with an organization to buy up medical debt up for pennies on the dollar and relieve that debt. And we've been told by the organization that we are working with that works with churches to do that, that if we target King County for a very nominal amount that I know we can fundraise, we could wipe out medical debt for those 4 times under the poverty level in all of King County. All that and chili. You gotta come. You really gotta come. So I just wanted to make sure you were hearing that. Sometimes it just slipped through because there's so much good we are doing this morning. The other thing I want you to know is, yes, this is Neighbors in Need Offering Day for the United Church of Christ, which also does remarkable things for people in this world. And those envelopes are in your pew. We'll say more about it at the offering time, or you can give online for that as well. And finally, we will be lifting up prayers of joy and concern. So if you have a joy or concern that you would love to share, The prayer cards are right in front of you, usually yellow, right in front of you in the pew. At the bottom, make sure you mark how you would like it shared. Sometimes people want it in worship, sometimes only the prayer chain, sometimes just for the pastors. Let us know when you turn in those prayer cards how we can hold your prayer today. Whew, I think that's a lot. And of course, it's probably not all. But the most important thing that I want to say, even if I've forgotten everything else, is that whoever you are and wherever you are on life's journey, that is the love we are also holding today. That is the love we are living into. Let's practice it by getting up and passing the peace with one another, and don't forget the people online. Please remain standing for our call to worship.
Okay, friendly people. Please remain standing for the call to worship. Today's call to worship is based on Psalm 150. Give our Creator the glory. Praise the Holy One for unsurpassed acts of wonder and magnificence. Watch how our dancing feet show our joy and love for Turtle Island and creation.
All our nations on land, in the sky, and in the waters, proclaim the abundance of our medicines and blessings. Praise be to our Creator.
Our opening hymn is "Many and Great, O God, are your works." This is sometimes called the Dakota hymn. It's number 3 in our hymnal.
Although I'd love to invite the children up, if they would like to come sit on the steps with me for a minute, I want to I'm not telling you so much of a long story this morning as I wanted you to get close enough so that you could see some of the instruments that we have, because in just a minute, the choir is going to sing a special anthem that uses those instruments. And the song that they are singing today, you can sit, love. You want to sit right here? Thanks, Oliver. The song that the choir is singing today is based on a Cherokee morning song. That Cherokee morning song is something like a song and a prayer mixed together. And it is sung in the morning, like it says, as a way to just give gratitude to God first thing before anything else happens. But the special thing about Cherokee morning songs is that they're not just songs that you sing with your voice. They are also songs that have the sound of creation in them, as though creation is singing with us. And so I wanted to show you some of the instruments that sometimes help make those creation sounds. The first one is one that Bron has over there, and if you can't see her, you're welcome to get up and turn towards her. She's right over here. I'll sit right here so people can see over me. Do you see what she's holding? She's holding a recorder. It's something, sounds a lot like a Native American flute, and it's supposed to imitate the sound of a bird singing gratitude to God. Let's see if, Bron, will you play it just a little so we can hear that song? Doesn't it sound like a song? Do you know the song it reminds me of? There's a bird called a mourning dove. It's the mourning that means a little bit of sadness, but a mourning dove. And it sings first thing in the time in the morning. And that's what that reminds me of. When the choir sings, I wonder if you will hear that bird singing with the choir singing. But that's not all. The other thing that's going to be in this song is a natural instrument that no one even had to go very far to find. It's the instrument of water. Elliot, would you help me with it just a minute? I'll show you what to do. Come on up here. Because you're a little bit tall. Hold that glass and just hold it up over the bowl and just slowly pour it in. And you listen. Can you hear that? Like raindrops, like a river. That's beautiful. Thank you for your help, love. Appreciate that. All right, so listen when the choir sings today for the bird and for the river. The other thing that they're going to use is right here in front of Katie. Do you see these bowls? They're called singing bowls. And if you play them, you just play, it's almost a vibration that sounds, well, I'll see what it sounds like to you. Go ahead and you play it. Do you hear that vibration sound? I saw Oliver pluck his ears because it really does vibrate, doesn't it? It's sort of supposed to be kind of the sound. It could be the wind. It could be the spirit. What do you think it sounds like?
The wind.
The wind? That sound will also be in our song today. The sound of the wind. Who knew you could create an instrument that sounds like that? And I've saved the best for last. The most special instrument of all. Mike has it right over here. You see the drum? You can come closer. The drum is special because it is the sound of a heartbeat. Not just of people, but of animals, of the whole earth, the heartbeat. They say sometimes if you sit in a room where someone is playing a drum just right, your heart will beat in the same rhythm as the drum after a while. It joins the drum in singing about the heart, singing praise to God. So Mike was going to play a little bit. Can I ask you a question? And this is up to you. Can they try it? Oh. Go ahead. Ooh. Stella, what do you try? Go. Elliot. Come on. Ooh. Beth, you want to try it? No? Okay. Play it one more time, Mike. Can you feel it in your heart? Thank you. All right. That's what I wanted you to hear this morning. How this Cherokee morning song doesn't pray with just our mouths and our voices, but with all these instruments that call the whole creation to sing. So my invitation to you, if you want, you can either sit with your parents or you can sit right here in this pew so you can see what's going on, and we'll sit with you. And then after the choir sings, we'll send you to Sunday school. Where would you like to sit? Great. Great. I'd like to sit there too because I want to be as close as possible to the choir. Just move. Yes, you do. Thank you, choir, for helping all of creation to bless God. And we are going to bless you if you're heading back to the pews or if you're heading out to Sunday school with Miss Carol here. So can we sing a blessing over these children right now?
Today, our scripture reading and later our Lord's Prayer come from the First Nations version of the New Testament. This translation was first envisioned by Terry Wildman, a member of the Ojibwa and Yaqui tribes. In collaboration with 25 other tribal representatives, he set the Creator's stories in cultural and linguistic patterns similar to those used for native oral storytelling. Though there are many names for God among First Nations people, in this translation, God is called Great Spirit or Creator. Jesus is called Creator Sets Free. I love that. And though this translation was envisioned as a gift to the First Nations people, Terry Wildman said he offers it as a gift to all people with the hope they will listen closely and hear something new about Creator's love. Listen to this story, Creator Sets Free, or Jesus, tells in Mark chapter 12, verses 1 through 9. Once again, Creator Sets Free, Jesus, began to speak to them using stories. A tribal member planted a large vineyard. He encircled it with a hedge, dug a hole for stomping the juice from the grapes, and built a tower for watching over it. He then rented it out to other tribal farmers for a share of the grapes. Then he traveled far away on a long journey to another land. When harvest time came, the tribal member who owned the vineyard sent a trusted messenger to gather his share of the grapes, but the farmers beat him and sent him away empty-handed. The vineyard owner sent another messenger, but they treated him shamefully, struck him on the head, and sent him away also. So he sent a third messenger, and this one they killed. The same thing was done to many others he sent. They beat some and killed others. Finally, the vineyard owner had only one more that he could send, his much-loved son. So last of all, he sent his own son to them. They will respect my son, he said to himself. But those tribal farmers said to themselves, this vineyard will one day belong to his son. If we kill him, the vineyard will be ours. So they killed him and threw his body out of the vineyard. What do you think the owner of the vineyard will do? Creator Sets Free, Jesus, asked the people who were listening.
This is a difficult story to hear, don't you think? As Julie mentioned, the scripture that you just heard, the translation of it, comes from the recently published First Nations version of the New Testament. They are currently working on a translation of the Psalms, and slowly working on Old Testament stories as well. And it seemed obvious to use this version today as we honor Indigenous Peoples Day by adding this voice into our worship. It was an obvious choice, but it was not one done lightly. Before I decided I would use this text, I attended a webinar that included Terry Wildman, who had first envisioned this translation. He had wanted to capture in the Gospels some of the rhythms and cultural relevance and traditional heart languages, he said, of over 6 million English-speaking First Nations people of North America, so that maybe they would hear themselves, or at least their heartbeat, in the Gospel. I asked him if this translation was only intended for Indigenous people. And he told me, actually, he considered it a gift from Indigenous people to the whole sacred family, including you. I asked him how we could use this gift appropriately, and he said, listen to it read with an open heart, and see if you hear something new and true about the love of the Creator. What many Indigenous people know is that stories are powerful if they are true stories, even if they contain hard truths that are hard to listen to. Sharing and listening to stories, to true stories, sometimes even stories with hard truths, is how generations and generations have passed along learning about how to become a beloved community of God. Sharing and listening to true stories is where healing begins, Wyman said. And he believed in the power of stories to heal. And Jesus believed in that power too. And that's why he spent so much time in his ministry telling stories that are still speaking and healing, including the parable that we just heard today. Story is central to healing. But one of the commentaries about the parable that you just heard Julie read, one of the commentaries that I read said this is a dangerous story. Because another true thing about stories is they can be edited and revised and erased and used in ways they were never intended. This story you heard has been used or abused for centuries by as a Christian text that justifies all manner of prejudice and violence, particularly against Jews, but also against persons of other faiths and spiritualities, and even other Christians that those with the power that be want to label heretics. For centuries, its power was twisted to tell a story that powerful people wanted to tell. They wanted to tell a story of God giving the white Christian church power over others' lands and lives. I even read that Thomas Jefferson and Leo Tolstoy left this parable out of their versions of the story of the Bible that they wrote. Because from what they were hearing, it was so antithetical to the God they thought Jesus was preaching about that they couldn't believe it was possibly true. And if it wasn't true, it was dangerous. But Terry Wildman and the tribal representatives that shaped this version of Creator's story left it in. Despite all of the attempts by empire after empire to twist this story for its own purposes, I can only imagine that they heard the original powerful truth that can never be wrung out of the gospel. I can only imagine they heard a story that sounded familiar to them about a vineyard, a treasured image of many ancient peoples to describe the Creator's gift of the good earth. And in this story, the Creator, the original landowner, lovingly prepares and preserves this fertile ground. And he intends for that ground to be shared. The landowner protects it, sets watch over it, equips it for a coming harvest, and then he trusts it to the leaders of the tribes, those with power, to steward it in his absence. It is God's vineyard. It is a part of God's story of loving, trusting relationship. Tended well, all will receive a just distribution and just what they need. But the hard truth of the story is some powerful people didn't tend it well and didn't intend to share it. And time after time, God sends messengers to try to call the people back into right relationship. But time after time, you begin to see this pattern of privilege over and over and over that accelerates and becomes increasingly violent. The Creator finally even sends his own Son to bring the people back to their senses. His child is killed. This is a hard story with some hard truths in it. And it is offered as a gift in this translation from Indigenous peoples saying, do you hear anything new about the love of God? Does something shift in this story when you don't hear it from a position of privilege preached from church pulpits for generations, but you begin to listen to it from the ground, the land itself, up with an open heart, from storytellers who have experienced violent domination and had their land stolen too? Can you hear how their story, not just Indigenous people, but people over time who have been conquered in the name of God, how their story is held with great compassion and tenderness in God's story? How they have become the messengers to us saying, what do you think the Creator will do next? And I believe that is their gift to us this morning. That question before you read anything else past this passage, that invites you to also ask, what will I do next? What will I do next that might change the ending of this story, that might break the patterns of privilege in this story? That is the power that is being put in your hands. The invitation to return to right relationship, the invitation to see that healing can begin. Several months ago, a small group from this church imagined pulling our missional thread of anti-racism through this Sunday morning worship. And this Sunday, just one day ahead of Indigenous Peoples Day, seemed like the right time to tug on that thread. And this small group from this church joined a larger cohort in the Pacific Northwest called Reckoning with Racism. And they met over the last 2 years with people from many denominations trying to learn a new model, a new chapter, a pattern-breaking chapter of how to build and heal community, breaking their own patterns of privilege and power that we are all caught in. The Reckoning with Racism journey centered the voices of those most affected by racism, including Indigenous people. We heard from tribal elders, and we learned from them that our embedded patterns of privilege even affect our intention to do good things. Because more often than not, we assume that we alone know what's good for somebody else. We act without even asking what healing looks like for the ones who have been harmed by churches that look like ours and who know more about what they need than we do. And when we asked what's the first step we could take to become an anti-racist church to break harmful patterns, we were told to go home and to start listening to our own story. To start listening to see what truths we were telling about our community. And were they edited truths? And were they whole truths? What is the story we tell ourselves about this sacred place that we've sometimes called the church in the wildwood? Is it a true story, a whole truth? The next step was to discover the story of the original occupants of this land before we said this land belonged to us and started telling our story. And to ask ourselves with humility, what do their stories tell us about our patterns and our ancestors' patterns of stewarding God's vineyard here in West Seattle? What truth, even hard truth, might lead us to healing ourselves before we dash out hoping to heal somebody else? The assignment wasn't what any of us expected. But this group took the work seriously. And they created what is called a sacred land story for Fauntleroy Church. And we were promised that if we shared it, there would be healing in it, for each of us individually and for all of us collectively. And so that's what I want to do for the rest of this time. I want you to just sit in a tradition of oral storytelling that is as old as time. I cannot tell the story of the pain of the Indigenous people, but I can work with Carolyn, who'll be a second voice with me, to share the sacred land story that we discovered for ourselves here that is informed by their stories. We can share that. And we were promised, if we share it true, not some exhaustive historical accounting, but as a continuation of the parable you just heard, then we might just hear something new about the love of God for us. So, Carolyn, will you help me with this story? And I invite you to listen in any way you are most comfortable. Sitting up in your pews, closing your eyes. See what you hear. Our story begins like this. As members of the little brown church in the wildwood that grew into a 1950s anchor for this suburban neighborhood, we asked ourselves, what's the sacred story our land has to tell us about this church? And what stories were a part of the land before we say the land belonged to us?
It starts with the earth's generosity, dense forest and clear streams, providing home to the Coast Salish people who harvested shellfish and plants and who fished, made camps, and buried their dead for thousands of years before white settlers arrived. Imagine black bears, eagles, orcas, and people all sharing the bounty of salmon. Imagine the people who lived in this abundance and how they thought of themselves as part of this land rather than owning pieces of the land.
Our church story began with another type of generosity, born of a gift that started with a gift that was never freely given. The land of our church was subject to the donation land law in 1853 and the 1862 Homestead Act, which allowed ownership of land parcels by virtue of registering for a generous government program designed to encourage white settlers to live in the Pacific Northwest. This was to increase the number of white settlers to accelerate claims to statehood. And it included the explicit intent of removing or eradicating the indigenous population. Even as the number of settlers increased, Coast Salish peoples of the region, which included the local Duwamish people, were already experiencing decimation by diseases brought by those first Europeans exploring this area.
Then, the Point Elliott Treaty of 1854-1855 further cleared the way for white settlers. Negotiations of the treaty with these remnants of tribes were marked by cultural misunderstandings. An uneven power dynamic meant white leadership determined whose voices would be heard. Ignoring the voices of women and the different tribal understandings of who could best represent each tribe, or even which tribe had any power to be heard at all. And even then, any agreements disintegrated with unfulfilled promises. The true goal of most white leaders in this region was not negotiation. Rather, it was further marginalization and even destruction of the indigenous way of life and displacement of families.
There was resistance to this injustice, including a Native rebellion in 1855 through 56, a so-called war to keep their lands. But these were put down by the United States military, and the Coast Salish people were forced to leave this land to relocate onto reservations. And some went north to the Tulalip Reservation, and some went south to the Muckleshoot Reservation, and some went west to the Suquamish Reservation. And by 1865, the city of Seattle made a law that indigenous people were banned and outlawed to exist in the city. Some indigenous people remained and were exploited for labor in early Seattle through 1884. Some retreated to West Seattle, to this peninsula, to live along the riverbank until their homes were burned down in 1893. Some Duwamish people intermarried with whites, and all these acts of injustice and erasure were not just the ugliness of a certain point in time. They continue to have ripple effects on current tribes' abilities to carry on with their cultural and economic practices, to recover their languages and their traditions, to receive legal recognition and reclaim their rights. The Duwamish tribe is still seeking legal representation as a tribe.
After Coast Salish people were removed, the land our church stands on was purchased by John Adams in 1905. Adams made his fortune outfitting people heading for the Klondike Gold Rush and in Seattle real estate. Adams advocated extending a streetcar line to Fauntleroy, which in 1907 accelerated real estate sales and housing development even more. West Seattle, including Fauntleroy, was annexed and became part of the city of Seattle in 1907.
Then with gifts of building materials from business leader and sawmill owner Lawrence J. Coleman, and a donation of land by Adams, a group of people who had previously worshiped at Plymouth Church downtown embarked on building a more permanent structure to house their worship services here. Records celebrate the pioneering spirit of these church builders. A symbol of these early worshipers even stands in our worship today. It is one of the lanterns that was used to light the way of those coming to worship. The story of the pioneering pluck and vision and institution building and the communal effort were usually the beginning of the story that we tell ourselves about this church in the Wildwood that was built in a day.
It is a story of settling into and transforming this space and the land around it to meet the needs of a growing congregation. It's also a story of displacing those who had a different relationship to the land, one that was more fluid and seasonal, and also sacred. Land ownership versus belonging to the land, two worldviews and one sacred creation.
And despite all efforts to displace and erase the Coast Salish peoples, the land still holds their story. In 1915, an excavation to widen Fauntleroy Way uncovered evidence of an ancient burial ground where Fauntleroy Creek flows into the Sound. Local residents have also found middens of clamshells indicating that Fauntleroy Cove had been a clamming site likely for thousands of years and into the 19th century. At very low tide, you can also see a boulder south of the ferry dock that the Salish people call Ayahos, the dormant spirit believed to cause landslides and earthquakes that shaped this area.
In the years that followed the end of World War II, this neighborhood saw another dramatic population rise. Housing again boomed with the 1954 development of Fontley Hills, and patterns of discrimination continued, this time aimed at other people of color. For example, homes were restricted to white ownership. The legacy of redlining and exclusionary covenants in mortgage papers contributed to the wealth inequalities between whites and people of color. Even after laws changed, courageously championed by some in Fauntleroy Church, the shadow of these racist practices still persists. The area around the church remains one of the least diverse in Seattle. Outer areas that were relegated to people of color still have schools with the highest number of children needing free lunch and other assistance.
In 1952, creation of the new neighborhood of what were then affordable middle-class homes and the post-war population boom all strained the capacity of this little brown church in the Wildwood. And so the members of Fauntleroy Church undertook a significant building campaign to build a larger church on this site. And that sense of ownership and growth continued the ripple effect of those earlier broken treaties. The building process included paving over a section of Fauntleroy Creek and installing a culvert, a narrow cement pipe for creek water to flow through. This disruption of the creek in the Fauntleroy Church culvert, along with other city culverts, created barriers for the life cycle of migrating salmon. And this violated one more of the core promises of the treaty that agreed to protect the Coast Salish people's livelihood and their ability to fish in their traditional waters.
The good community spirit that built the church in a day persists. Yet our connection to the land and our stewardship of it is also rooted in a pride of ownership, rather than a humble sense of belonging to the land. And our well-being lacks our acknowledgement that we are tied to the well-being of others and to creation itself.
Remembering, reassembling even the most difficult parts of this story on this land helps us to see our own history in a truer lens. We cannot be willfully ignorant if we hope to change ourselves or the world for the better. The blessings we benefit from today are directly related to a good faith community that has stewarded this good church. But we also benefited from the governmental policies that encouraged white-only settlement and discriminatory housing practices and racist social norms and systems that caused harm and even destruction to others. And these patterns of privilege and discrimination continue today in slightly different forms, but with similar harmful outcomes. And the holy work, if this is to be a healing story, is to notice the patterns we are still actively participating in and disrupt them before they do even more damage and ripple into the next generation. The holy work, as followers of Jesus, is to write the next chapter of this sacred land story, striving for repentance, justice, healing, and hopefully repair of those relationships that have been broken.
Knowing what we now know, how can we act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God? How can we move forward with humility, broadening relationships, and lovingly stewarding the land on which our church stands in ways that more truthfully honor God and those who were stewards of this place before we began to believe it was ours?
My invitation to you is to just hold a space for those holy questions. And then see if you hear Spirit speaking truth into that space. If you hear something about what Creator might do next and might do with us if we choose to work with the Creator and making this a place that is a garden of creation where all truly are welcomed and all are beloved. Amen. Just hold a minute.
Our new ABC News Ipsos poll finds Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump virtually tied. Harris leads Trump by just 2 percentage points in this survey of likely voters. Trump himself is traveling through several western states this weekend, rallying supporters.
Harris plans to differentiate herself.
One of the most healing things we do together is to hold one another in prayer. We offer strength to those who have prayers of concern, and then we amplify the joys of those who have great joy. There's just one prayer that I have this morning. Julie lifts up a prayer of gratitude for safety and ultimately the good outcome for Rusty, right? An 18-year-old childhood friend who had become lost last Saturday. Mm-hmm. Prayers that this never will happen again. Prayers for the Holy One being with Rusty, knowing that no child is lost to God. Prayers for God and for all of those who led Rusty home, where we hope healing and health can happen, and where he is surrounded by his friends who understand how precious he is and want to keep him safe from harm going forward. Lord, hear our prayers. I know there are other prayers that need to be lifted up this morning. Certainly we have all been holding great prayers for the world, from those who are finding their land upended by storms, who are finding this nation upended by its own not so truth-telling stories of power that seem to be causing great harm. We hold up also prayers for those in this congregation who we know are on journeys of healing, who have received news that have upended their family understanding of security and health, and who haven't quite found the words to put around that yet. But we know they need us to hold them until they do. We lift up prayers that have no words this morning. They are just deep sighs. But we know that God hears them, God sees the people who lifts them up or have those deep sighs. And Christ offered us from the beginning years ago a prayer that can hold our prayers with compassion. My invitation to you, though, this morning is that you hear it and read it and recite it differently. You'll need to look at your bulletin, or you can look at the screen. The Lord's Prayer that we'll say together is also from the First Nations version of the New Testament. See if it helps you hear the love of God in a refreshing way this morning as we hold it together, saying, O great Spirit, our Father from above, we honor your name as sacred and holy. Bring your good road to us, where the beauty of your ways in the spirit world above is reflected in the earth below. Provide for us by day the elk, the buffalo, and the salmon, the corn, the squash, and the wild rice, all things we need for each day. Release us from the things we have done wrong. In the same way, we release others from the things done wrong to us. Guide us away from the things that tempt us to stray from your good road. and set us free from the evil one and his worthless ways. Aho, may it be so. Amen. Isn't that beautiful? We've come to our time of offering. That is beautiful too.
Today, along with your personal offering, you are invited to consider giving to neighbors in need. As Karyn said previously, this is an annual offering of the UCC that also supports our American Indian neighbors. 1/3 of monies received is set aside for the UCC's Council for American Indian Ministries. Today, there are 20 UCC congregations on reservations and 1 urban multi-tribal UCC congregation in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Neighbors in Need offerings also strengthen other areas of justice work that the National UCC does on our behalf, including strong advocacy work on issues such as voting rights, immigration, healthcare, hate crimes, civil liberties, and environmental justice. This year, mental health as a universal right is also a really important key focus. Neighbors in Need offering envelopes are in the pews, or you're invited to give online at the Fauntleroy Church website. Please join me in the prayer of dedication. Great Spirit, we sometimes take pride in doing good things that require little of us, but turn away from evil things that challenge us, like repentance and repairing and deepening relationships. We acknowledge the suffering and the cause that has allowed to continue throughout creation. Help us set aside our pride and recenter our lives in relational love. Help us Our closing hymn is the Prayer of St. Francis.
Invite you to turn towards one another and see the light, the spark of the Spirit within you, that healing spark that is there and always there, no matter what stories we tell, no matter what happens to us, it is always there, calling to us and calling to us to remember. This benediction, I will share with you a poem by Joy Harjo, who was appointed the United States Poet Laureate in 2019, the first Native American to hold that position. When I finish the poem, there is a benediction response in your bulletin. Joy writes, "Remember the sky that you were born under. Know each of the stars' stories, and remember the moon and know who she is. And remember the sun's birth at dawn, that is the strongest point in time. And remember sundown and the giving away to night. Remember your birth, how your mother struggled to give you form and breath. You are evidence of her life and her mother's and hers. Remember your father, he is also your life. Remember the earth whose skin you are. Red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth, we are earth. Remember the plants and trees and animal life who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them. They are alive poems. Remember the wind, remember her voice. She knows the origin of the universe. Remember, especially remember, you are all people, and all people are you. Remember, you are this universe, and this universe is you. Remember, all is in motion, is growing, is you. Remember, language comes from this. Remember, the dance language is, that is life. And the people say, we will remember. Amen. Go in peace.